Sexual harassment is defined by the United Nations as an unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature, which can be any of the following: sexual innuendos, gestures, and physical acts. Even the act of whistling, winking, and licking one's lips are considered to be forms of sexual harassment. Many of these acts are committed in the workplace and some in schools. Many women who have been victims of such acts do not do anything after it, thinking that either they will get into bigger trouble or that they will not be taken seriously. But this is not the case of Cleo.
It was in June 2010. Galing ako sa isang eco camp. Mga 10 minutes bago ako bumaba, tinanong ko yung conductor na malapit na po ba tayo sa Villasis kung saan ako bababa for another bus ride to Nueva Ecija. And he said na mga 10 to 15 minutes pa. So, naramdaman ko na yung pagod ko, umidlip ako. Hanggang sa bigla na lang ako nagising. Nung nagising ako, naramdaman ko na lang merong gumagalaw dito on top of my breast. And at that time, sobrang balot na balot ako. I even have a shawl with me kasi sobrang lamig nga ng bus. Hindi naman niya ipinasok ng kamay niya, but it was really pressing hard on top of my breast. Eh di nagising ako. So ngayon, ang ginawa ko, inisip ko na lang malapit na pagbaba ko na lang, saka ako siya sisitahin. So pagkasabi ng ganyan ng conductor na bus stop na pwede na ako bumaba sa Villasis, tumayo na ako at hinugot ko na lahat ng lakas ng loob ko and sinampal ko siya. Sabi ko sa kanya, sana naisip mo na babae rin akong katulad ng nanay at ng asawa mo. At luckily, sakto na presinto rin yung aming binabaan. So hindi na ako nagdalawang isip, pinadampot ko na siya at pinakulong ko na siya. Sa mga kasama kong kabataan na nakararanas ng ganito, at siguro mas masahol pa nga sa naranasan ko, just be strong and isipin ninyo na hindi kayo nag-iisa sa kalagayang yan. Alamin nyo na meron kayong supportang pwedeng sandigan. Paglaban lang natin ang karapatan natin and we deserve equal right like any other people are.
What are the acts considered to be forms of sexual harassment? What can women do? How does one deal with sexual harassment? Good evening, I am Attorney Karen Jimeno and you are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. In connection with the celebration of Women's Month, we will be discussing for the whole month of March issues that affect women everywhere. Tonight, we'll be discussing the very sensitive issue of sexual harassment. What do you need to know about sexual harassment, such as the acts that constitute the act and what you need to know to file a case against persons who have committed such acts. We will be joined by someone who has been a staunch supporter and activist for women's rights in the country.
Yes, that's right. Tonight we are joined by our first guest in the show, Attorney Claire Padilla, Executive Director of Engender Rights, a legal NGO that advances women's rights. Thank you for joining us again, Attorney Claire.
You're welcome.
Now, we'll start with the case of Cleo. And as I was listening to it, it seems to me that this is not technically a form of sexual harassment as defined by the law. So I guess this is a good time for us to clarify what is the difference between sexual harassment and what happened to Cleo. Maybe Attorney Claire, you can shed light on this.
Okay. Well, by definition, sexual harassment is any unwanted conduct of a sexual nature. So generally speaking, what Cleo said, it can be considered sexual harassment, but it's not covered under Republic Act 7877.
That's right, because the UN, United Nations definition, is wider, diba? It says any unwanted, untoward sexual behavior.
It's more
so
expansive.
Yung nangyari kay Cleo is clearly sexual harassment under the United Nations. But under our law, Republic Act 7877,
it's not covered under the specific law on anti-sexual harassment, but she can file a case for acts of lasciviousness.
Okay.
Of course, we have to qualify.
Let's define first. What is sexual harassment under Philippine law?
So as of now, our Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of Republic Act 7877 covers unwanted conduct of a sexual nature, which would cover workplace or education environment. So in this case, specifically, it would cover demand, request, or requirement of a sexual favor with the use of authority, influence, or moral ascendancy. However, with our jurisprudence or the Supreme Court cases, we have had favorable decisions where it's not even non-explicit acts of sexual harassment can be covered by the law itself.
Now, if changing the scenario a little bit, if let's say Leo was a conductress there, or let's say she worked for the bus company and she happened to be there,
Right.
it would be covered, right?
It could be covered, yes, because there is a workplace environment. So that
But it
that
has
would be covered.
the accused in this case, yung mga magiging offender, should also be working for
Should
the
also be
bus
working, yeah.
company, right? Or
Well,
if it's
we have had cases where even if they're not co-employees, as long as it's within the workplace environment, so it
I
can
see.
a
So
complete
it's
stranger
It's
as well?
possible. It's possible to have it. To have the company made liable as well. So it could be covered by the law in that sense. However, strictly speaking, the respondent would not be criminally punishable. So as of now, that's the
Yeah,
the,
but
the
if
law,
you
the
file it
status as of
under
now.
under
7877.
7877 sexual harassment, right?
Now, of course, there's another law, no, which covers similar acts like acts
Right.
of lasciviousness.
Which
Right.
is probably what Cleo filed in this
No.
case nung dinala niya sa presinto, no? Yung
I think-
report niya pala.
I'm just going difference. Maybe we could tell our audience what's the difference between acts of lasciviousness, which falls under the revised penal code, and then itong Republic Act 7877.
Okay. To compare the two, with acts of lasciviousness, it's usually lewd conduct, right? So
Meaning
any
kabastusan.
mahalay. In the past, with the Supreme Court cases, you have had experiences where yung paghawak sa breast,
Which is what happened to
that's
Cleo,
clearly
no?
covered. Kissing in front of a large group, for example, so that would be covered. If you compare it to, that would cover even outside of the workplace, outside of the education environment. So clearly, cases that happen in the streets,
Yeah, or in this
inside
case, yung
buses,
bus company.
that would be
Yeah.
covered, right?
Okay.
Okay. So now let's answer a few questions from our viewers with the help of Attorney Claire. Our first question is from Belinda via Twitter. She asks, what laws cover sexual harassment? Is it stated there what forms of sexual harassment can be committed? So this is already what we answered, that sexual harassment is covered by Republic Act 7877, and the coverage is basically forms of sexual harassment, meaning unwanted or untoward sexual conduct that is in a work or educational or training environment. So covered dito yung mga teachers, coaches,
Yes.
Right,
trainers,
and,
no?
and covered yung mga acts now, sometimes we feel it's innocent, no? Like green jokes or winking or mga innuendos, verbal and non-verbal
Right.
actions, diba? So,
Right.
so that's also covered. So, all right. Now, our second question naman comes from Margaret, also via Twitter. She asked, does the law against sexual harassment also cover sexual advances made via text messages? Naku,
Interesting
yan,
question.
interesting
Kasi
yan.
sabihin nila,
I was
wala
gonna ask
naman
that.
ako dun
Yes.
Hindi kami magkasama, di
Oo,
ba?
wala namang
Yes.
physical
Oo.
contact, di ba?
It can be covered kasi, di ba, we're not just talking about physical, but we include nonverbal acts, text messages, Facebook, etc. As long as there's either a workplace or education
Or
relationship.
training environment.
Yes. So
I
that's
think
covered.
another crucial point here na nasa law is that, especially if it is in relation to the grant of either a grade or any favor
Right.
or favorable treatment
Right.
at work or in school, then it is covered by sexual harassment.
If you consider the requirement of the use of authority, influence, moral ascendancy, so those who would be harassers would be teachers, etc. But you could also consider employees,
Employees.
co-workers.
So not necessarily someone who has
Right.
ascendancy or
Right.
superiority over you.
So you have examples of the quid pro quo type of sexual harassment. So that would be the case of teachers, employers. But you would also have the hostile type of sexual harassment, which would cover gender relations.
Kahit na pantay lang sila sa workplace.
Co-workers, co-students, or even subordinates.
Okay. So Katrina asked us via Facebook, my boss has been making green jokes about me. He even tells me to always wear skirts to work because my legs look nice. Can this be considered as sexual harassment? What can I do for him to stop? And should I report this to the HR department? Where else can I report this to? So mahabang tanong. Una-una, pinapasuot siya na skirt. That's green jokes as well. Would we consider this as
Yes,
sexual harassment?
definitely. And as long as she's having difficulty going to work because of these types of requirements.
Meaning it creates a hostile,
it's a hostile environment already. So she can file a complaint with the HR department, definitely. It would be good for her to document the acts and then who were the witnesses, the dates, and then precisely with the company, they're supposed to act on it and conduct an investigation.
Yes.
And if there's no sufficient action on it, immediate and sufficient action, she can even file damages against the company itself. And of course, against the sexual harasser, she can file a criminal case for sexual harassment. And what we do is that we also file cases of acts of lasciviousness. But in this case, a case of violation of anti-sexual harassment would do.
Okay, so Claire, first go to your HR department. If they don't do anything, I think nasa law rin yan, diba? That the employers can be liable with your boss to be, they can also be prosecuted if they don't do anything about this. And then you can file both sexual harassment and acts of lasciviousness. Para sigurado, no?
Right.
Let's take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these reminders. You are still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. We are still joined by Attorney Claire Padilla of Engender Rights. Thank you again, Attorney Claire. And I have a question kasi ako naman, meron nag-consult sa akin before. He was a gym instructor, pero he was also a trainer in a high school. And he was telling me that he received a complaint for sexual harassment. And nakuha pa sa CCTV na kinis niya yung student. But he told me it was with consent kasi. So I guess, looking at it from both sides, pwede rin siguro ma-abuse yung law if you have really a consensual relationship and then nag-file. Oo, sabi niya kasi parang napagalitan niya tong student na to with their friends and then after that biglang na-file na siyang sexual harassment. So maybe can you clarify kung ano dapat yung, what people should follow, especially if they're coaches or professors?
Well, first, the best thing to do for teachers, coaches, would be not to engage in any sexual relationship with their students. Kasi nga,
that's already, you're already courting trouble.
Treading a thin line, di ba? So the best would be not to engage in any sexual relationship. In that case, kumbaga, they would not be made liable for any case of sexual harassment.
So consent is a defense?
Well, that's difficult kasi, especially in high school students, diba? There's always a possibility that I would always take into consideration the side of the complainant, syempre. So in cases of sexual harassment, it should be the psychological impact on the victim that should be considered and not the what offender. The perpetrator or offender is saying, di ba? So it's really best not to have any relationship with
it. Lalo na you're in a position that you either give grades or kung boss ka, you give bonus.
So you have that influence nga, di ba? Now, I wanted to ask, speaking of influence, now, you notice I'm on my best behavior now because it's
Women's Week.
It's Women's Month.
Women's
Month, and I'm trying to avoid any kind of action or words that can be misinterpreted. But I just wanted to clarify, and this is for the benefit of the men out there. This law, while mainly made for women, for the benefit of women, it also applies to both genders. Meaning, I watched this movie, Horrible Bosses. Is it Horrible Bosses?
Yes, I think so.
Ang babae naman yun. Jennifer Aniston basically, had a whip and everything, and was really
harassing yung employee na lalaki naman.
Lalaking employee. No, it can happen. No, a guy can file a complaint, right?
Right. So it's true what you said, that mainly it's a gender-based law where women are supposedly being protected, because in reality it's mostly the women who are victims. However, there can be cases where even women can be harassers, and even men can harass other men as well, or even women harass other women as well. So it's
so
sexually harass other women.
So it's gender neutral.
Right, right.
Okay.
Great. All right, so let's answer a few more questions from our viewers. Our next question naman is from Angie via Facebook, and she asks, I've been noticing that my teacher has been making advances at one of my classmates, such as touching her shoulder or saying inappropriate things. Can I file a complaint against him to the school? How can I prove that he has been sexually harassing my classmate? So in this case,
If you're doing it on behalf of another person, is that allowed by the law that you file the case?
I would say it's covered by the law. However, it would be best to have the complainant, the one who is the victim, to file the complaint as well. So it can be the person witnessing, and it can be the victim herself. If there are other witnesses and other complainants as well, that's usually the case in sexual harassment. It's not just one victim. So it would be best to file, kumbaga, it classifies as a class suit.
But what if in this case her classmate refuses to file that case against the teacher dahil natatakot siguro? Can she still go on and proceed to file this sexual harassment case against her teacher?
Personally, I would say she can. She can file the complaint. It would be good if there are other witnesses and other complainants as well who might have been victims in the past. But otherwise,
otherwise it can. You're right. It can be abused. Diba? Let's say I'm just going to file a complaint against his teacher who's not passing,
giving you bad
giving me a bad grades or
grades.
treating me bad. Diba?
well, for victims, it's very difficult for them to come out really. So. In some cases, we have victims who are, because of the impact of the sexual harassment, they're unable to ride on taxis alone for several months. They can't ride on the elevator just because they fear of meeting the perpetrator there. So, ganun yung impact. And some of them actually suffer miscarriages pa nga. So, merong ganun kind of stress that happens to them.
A lot of emotional stress. Our next question comes from May, also via Facebook. She asked, I was up for a promotion a while back. My boss started making advances towards me, which I repelled. On the day when they announced the promotion, instead of calling my name, they called a colleague's name. Can this be considered sexual harassment? Okay, that's a tricky question because you don't know kung related sila, diba? I mean, definitely meron sexual advances which could be under a violation of the anti-sexual harassment law, but then whether your lack of promotion is connected with your basically repelling your boss's sexual advances is subject to evidence. No? In these cases, Attorney Claire, how do they normally prove?
It's possible. She can, in other jurisdictions in the U.S., they actually use sexual favoritism. So for one who kumaga acceded to the sexual harassment and has been favored, someone can be discriminated against, diba? So in that case, there is a possibility to file a complaint that there is sexual favoritism, etc. So in this case, there's a possibility to file a complaint.
But actually, in this case, yung pagbigay pa lang ng sexual advances, that's already a violation under the law. So you can
of the law itself.
Yes, of the anti-sexual harassment law. So on that basis alone, you can already file a case, even if you can't prove na hindi ka na-promote because of it.
Right. Okay. Now, Danica naman asks us via Twitter, what penalties can violators face if found guilty of sexual harassment?
Okay.
What are the penalties?
Under Republic Act 7877, it's as of now 1 month up to 6 months, but we're trying to raise the penalty with amendment.
1 month up to 6 months of imprisonment, right?
Yes.
And then what about fines? How much?
Fine, it's 10,000 to 20,000. But as I mentioned earlier, we file at the same time acts of lasciviousness, which is punishable by 6 months, 1 day, up to 6 years.
Now,
So bigger penalty.
this is just to clarify, no, kasi the law mentions that employers can be solidarily liable.
Right.
Under the act. Now, the thing is, the act provides for penal damages, no?
Right,
like
right.
punishment of imprisonment and all that. Are employers also solidarily
Pwede bang
liable? Pwede
makulong
ba
ang
makulong mga employers? Yeah?
As of now, with the current law under Republic Act 7877, they're only solidarily liable with regard to damages. So it's damages.
Meaning,
damages, yeah.
yung pagbayad ng damages sa victim.
Right.
But they can't be
Imprisoned
imprisoned as
for
well.
not doing anything.
Yes.
Ayan.
Our last question comes from Lizelle, and she asks us via Facebook, how can women be empowered to report incidents of sexual harassment, especially when someone thinks that the women asked for it to happen to them? Okay, so basically she's asking, how can we empower women to report these cases? Because Attorney Claire was mentioning, it's really difficult for women to come out, no?
Well, first, it's telling the perpetrator right away that this is unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. She could say, I'm sexually harassed. And then, of course, filing a complaint is very important. So, for women now, it's very important that ever since there was a law, they can easily say that this is an act of sexual harassment. It's punishable under the law. Before, women were sexually harassed, but they didn't know
They didn't
that
know
it
it
was
was
called
punishable,
sexual
yes.
harassment.
But I have a question. Yung organizations like Engender Rights, do you have basically an accessible counseling or number? Kasi
Hotline.
normally that's the problem. You feel isolated, parang nahihiya kang i-share sa iba. So would you know of any organizations that they can approach so that they can share this experience?
Well, I'm a consultant of the Quezon City Protection Center. So we give free legal counseling there every Monday morning. So that's at the Quezon City General Hospital. So it's possible for them to call us there.
Yeah, do you have a number?
Well, the place is the Quezon City General Hospital at Seminary Road.
Okay.
So the Quezon City Protection Center is there.
Okay,
They can
so
call the trunk line
for the
of
women outfit.
protection.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. And of course, we'll use this to give a recap. One, there's a difference, ladies and even gentlemen out there, between sexual harassment and acts of lasciviousness. Our interview when we started the show today was more of a case of acts of lasciviousness kasi it was not in a work, educational, or training environment. So, for women who, if you get harassed in public places by strangers, you're not covered by the sexual harassment law, but you can also file a criminal case for acts of lasciviousness. And Rod, basically, he pointed out that this covers men.
It covers
and
men as
women.
well. So
yes.
that's comforting to know.
Yes. So if you have,
So-
for males out there, if you have a female boss or any boss, kahit lalaki pa yan or otherwise, if they harass you in the workplace, you can also file a case for sexual
Yeah.
harassment.
And folks, and the gentlemen out there, of course, and kasi tayo, men ang normally mahilig dyan. So you remember, whistling, green jokes, sexual innuendos, gestures, those are things that, sometimes you do it innocently, but you have to be careful because those are acts
You might
that
be.
will fall under Republic Act 7877. All right?
And for women out there, please don't be afraid. Report these types of incidents.
Yeah.
And if you
Kamahiya.
feel alone, Attorney Claire, can you please repeat to us Quezon City Hospital?
Yeah.
Yes, we are at the Quezon City Protection Center at the Quezon City General Hospital. So we give free legal services there every Monday morning.
All right.
Okay.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. We'd like to thank our guest, Attorney Claire, for being with us again tonight. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Join us again next Monday as we talk about your legal rights on the issue of work discrimination against women. Good night.